Dr. Jake Morrison stood at the large window of Earth's orbital station, watching the alien ships approach. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his simple blue uniform. The ships were massive, dark metal beasts that made human vessels look like toys. After decades of wondering if humans were alone in the universe, today would give them the answer. "They're beautiful," whispered Lisa Park, the communications specialist standing beside him. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes were wide with wonder. "I never imagined our first contact would look like this." Ben Carter, the cultural attaché, cleared his throat nervously. He was a thin man with kind eyes who had spent years studying human cultures. Now he would need to understand an alien one. The radio messages suggested they're called Zephyrians. They seemed to have a military structure. Jake nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. As the lead xenobiologist, he had dreamed of this moment his entire life. He had studied every theory about alien life, read every science fiction book, and prepared for countless possibilities. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. The docking bay doors opened with a loud hiss. The first alien to step through was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. She was 7 feet tall, with muscles that would make a human bodybuilder look weak. Her skin was a pale blue color, and her silver hair was braided down her back. She wore dark armor that seemed to be made from some kind of metal Jake didn't recognize. Behind her came more alien women, all just as tall and strong. They moved with the confidence of natural warriors, their eyes scanning the room like predators looking for threats. The leader's green eyes settled on Jake and his team with what looked like disappointment. "I am War Commander Lyra Voss of the Zephyrian Empire," the leader announced in perfect English. Her voice was deep and commanding. "We have come to meet the warriors of Earth." Jake stepped forward, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "Welcome to our station, Commander Voss. I am Dr. Jake Morrison, xenobiologist and head of the diplomatic team. This is Lisa Park, our communications specialist, and Ben Carter, our cultural attaché." The alien commander looked Jake up and down, her expression growing more disappointed by the second. "You are the warriors we were told about?" "Well, we're not exactly warriors," Jake began, but one of the other aliens interrupted him. Sub-Commander Kira Thane, the second alien, introduced herself. She was slightly shorter than the commander, but just as muscular. "Where are your male warriors? Surely you did not send your weakest to greet us." Lisa stepped forward, a slight edge in her voice. "Dr. Morrison is one of Earth's most respected scientists. We sent our best diplomatic team." Kira looked at Lisa with something that might have been respect, then turned back to Jake with obvious disgust. "Your males are scientists? What happened to your warriors?" Ben tried to explain. "On Earth, we value knowledge and peace. Our military exists, but we prefer to solve problems through discussion and cooperation." The aliens exchanged glances that Jake couldn't interpret. Commander Voss walked closer to him, and Jake had to crane his neck to look up at her. She was so tall that the top of his head barely reached her shoulder. "How tall are you, human male?" she asked. "About 5 feet 8 inches, Jake replied, feeling smaller by the second. "And your weight?" "Around 160 pounds. Commander Voss laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "Our younglings are larger than you. How do your males survive?" "We use tools and technology," Jake explained. "We've learned to work together to overcome physical limitations." "Tools," Kira repeated, the word like it tasted bad. "You rely on tools because you are too weak to rely on yourselves." The conversation continued for another hour, but it only got worse. The Zephyrians seemed amazed that human males weren't physically dominant. They couldn't understand how human society functioned without the strongest individuals ruling over the weak. When Jake tried to explain human democracy, Commander Voss interrupted. You mean the weak ones get to make decisions? How does anything get done? We vote, Lisa explained. Everyone gets a say in important decisions. Even the males? Kira asked, looking at Jake like he was a curious pet. Of course, Ben said. Gender doesn't determine someone's right to participate in society. The aliens found this hilarious. Several of them began laughing, the sound echoing off the metal walls of the station. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment. On Zephyria, Commander Voss explained, the strong lead and the weak follow. It is the natural order. Your males are so weak that they cannot even lead themselves. Jake tried one more time to explain. Human achievements. We've traveled to space, built cities, cured diseases, and created art. We've done all of this through cooperation and intelligence. Your females did this, Kira corrected. Your males just followed along. That's not true. Jake protested. Men and women work together as equals. Equals? Commander Voss looked shocked. How can equals exist when one group is clearly superior to the other? The meeting went on for 2 more hours, but it was clear that the Zephyrians had made up their minds about humans. They saw human males as evolutionary failures, and human females as tragically held back by their weak male counterparts. As the aliens prepared to leave, Commander Voss made her final judgment. We came here hoping to find a warrior culture worthy of alliance with the Zephyrian Empire. Instead, we found a species of weak males who hide behind tools and females who have forgotten their natural superiority. We will remain for 1 week to study your culture, she continued, but I doubt we will find anything to change our minds. Your species is not worthy of joining our empire. The aliens left the docking bay, their heavy footsteps echoing in the silence they left behind. Jake, Lisa, and Ben stood in the empty room, processing what had just happened. Well, Ben said finally, that could have gone better. Jake looked out at the alien ships, still docked to their station. Somewhere out, there was an entire civilization that saw humans as weak and pathetic. The worst part was, Jake was starting to wonder if they were right. 3 days after the disastrous first meeting, Jake Morrison found himself in the station's main conference room, trying to salvage what was left of human dignity. Across the table sat Commander Lyra Voss and Sub-Commander Kira Thane. They're massive. Forms making the human-sized furniture look like children's toys. We have decided to allow a limited cultural exchange, Commander Voss announced, her voice carrying the tone of someone granting a favor to lesser beings. Perhaps we can learn something useful from your technology, even if your males are disappointments. Jake forced himself to stay calm. We're honored by your interest, Commander. We've assigned our best people to work with your team. The door opened and Marine Staff Sergeant Chris Hayes entered the room. He was one of the taller humans on the station at 6 feet, with the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym. But next to the Zephyrians, he still looked small. Behind him came Katie Mills, a young engineer with bright red hair and curious eyes. This is Staff Sergeant Hayes, our military representative, Jake said, gesturing to Chris. And Katie Mills, one of our top engineers. Kira looked Chris up and down with obvious amusement. This is your warrior? Chris stood at attention, his jaw tight with controlled anger. Yes, ma'am. I serve in the Earth Defense Forces. Earth Defense Forces, Kira repeated, then burst out laughing. What do you defend Earth from? Angry insects. We defend against any threat to human civilization, Chris replied steadily, though Jake could see the muscle in his jaw twitching. Commander Voss leaned forward in her chair, which groaned under her weight. Show me your muscles, human warrior. Chris hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve. His arm was well muscled by human standards, with clear definition from years of training. The Zephyrians looked at it like someone might examine a child's drawing. Pathetic, Kira said simply. I could break that arm with one hand. Katie Mills, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Physical strength isn't everything. Humans have survived and thrived by using our minds. The female speaks wisdom. Commander Voss said approvingly, It is unfortunate that your males are so weak that they dragged your species down. Over the following days, the cultural exchange began in earnest. The Zephyrians set up training areas where they demonstrated their combat techniques. Jake watched in amazement as Kira lifted weights that would require a forklift for humans to move. She moved with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so large. Her combat skills, honed by centuries of warrior tradition, Chris Hayes was required to participate in combat trials, and each one was more humiliating than the last. In hand-to-hand combat, Kira threw him across the room without breaking a sweat. In weapons training, she disarmed him so quickly that he barely saw her move. In strength tests, she lifted 3 times what he could manage. Your human warrior is weaker than our children, Kira announced after the 3rd day of trials. How does your species survive with such feeble males? Chris said nothing, but Jake could see the frustration building in his eyes. Every day brought new humiliations, new proof that humans were inferior to the Zephyrians in every physical measure. But Katie Mills was having a different experience. She had been assigned to observe Zephyrian technology, and what she found surprised her. Their ships were incredibly strong, but also incredibly simple. They used brute force solutions for problems that humans would solve with elegant engineering. Your power systems are fascinating, Katie told Commander Voss one afternoon. But have you considered using distributed networks instead of centralized? Power cores? Distributed networks? The commander asked, looking confused. Katie pulled up a holographic display showing human ship designs. Instead of one big power source, we use many smaller ones. If one fails, the others keep working. It's more reliable. But one large power source is stronger, Kira protested. Stronger, yes, but not smarter, Katie replied. What happens if your main power core is damaged in battle? The Zephyrians exchanged glances. Jake could see that Katie had touched on something they hadn't considered. Our armor is too strong for enemies to damage our power cores, Commander Voss said, but she sounded less certain than usual. Every armor has weak points, Katie said gently. Humans learned long ago that it's better to plan for failure than to assume success. Jake began to notice other things about the Zephyrians. They were incredibly skilled warriors, but they seemed to have no scientists. Their technology was advanced, but hadn't changed in centuries. They had conquered many worlds through force, but they had never learned to innovate. Meanwhile, Chris Hayes was finding his own way to fight back. He couldn't match the Zephyrians in strength, but he began to use tactics they didn't expect. During one combat trial, he used the environment to his advantage, causing Kira to slip on a wet floor he had created. Cheating, Kira declared angrily. Strategy? Chris corrected. In real combat, you use every advantage available. A true warrior faces their enemy with honor, Kira said. A smart warrior makes sure they go home alive, Chris replied. The tension on the station was growing every day. The Zephyrians continued to mock human males, and Chris was reaching his breaking point. Jake could see the anger building in his friend's eyes, and he worried about what might happen if Chris finally snapped. The breaking point came during a training exercise in the station's cargo bay. The Zephyrians were demonstrating their combat techniques when Kira accidentally knocked over a piece of heavy equipment. The massive machine crashed into the wall, and sparks began flying from damaged electrical systems. Move away from the wall, Katie shouted, but it was too late. The electrical fire spread quickly, and the damaged systems began shutting down critical station functions. The Zephyrians stood back, unsure what to do. Their warrior training had taught them to fight enemies, but not to fix broken machines. As the fire grew larger, they seemed helpless for the first time since arriving. "We need to shut down the power to this section," Katie said, running to a control panel. "How?" Commander Voss asked, and Jake was surprised to hear uncertainty in her voice. "Chris, I need you to hold this panel steady while I reroute the power," Katie called out. Chris jumped into action, holding the damaged panel in place while Katie worked. Jake grabbed a fire extinguisher and began fighting the flames. Within minutes, the three humans had the situation under control. The Zephyrians watched in silence as the humans worked together to solve the problem. For the first time since their arrival, they seemed to be seeing humans differently. "How did you know what to do?" Kira asked Katie. "Training," Katie replied. "Every human learns basic emergency procedures. We have to work together to survive." "Your males helped," Commander Voss observed, as if this was surprising. "Of course they helped," Jake said. "When there's a crisis, humans work together regardless of gender." The Zephyrians looked at each other, and Jake thought he saw a flicker of something new in their eyes. It might have been respect, or it might have been confusion. Either way, it was a change from the constant mockery they had shown before as the humans finished cleaning up the damage. Jake wondered if this small incident might be the beginning of something bigger. The Zephyrians had seen humans work together to solve a problem they couldn't handle alone. Maybe that was worth something after all. The alarm started screaming at 0347 hours, jolting Jake Morrison from his sleep. Red warning lights flashed in his quarters as the station's emergency system announced the crisis that would change everything. Critical reactor failure in progress. All personnel report to emergency stations immediately. Jake pulled on his clothes and ran through the corridors, his heart pounding. The station's main reactor was the heart of everything they did here. If it failed completely, they would lose life support, gravity, and any chance of getting home. A live dot in the main control room, he found chaos. Katie Mills was bent over a computer terminal, her face pale with worry. Pete Jackson, the systems engineer, was shouting orders to his team. Dr. Amy Clark, their physicist, was running calculations on 3 different screens at once. "What's the situation?" Jake asked, though he already feared the answer. "The reactors. Quantum containment field is collapsing," Amy said without looking up from her work. "We're getting cascade failures in the primary systems. How long do we have?" Jake asked. "At this rate, maybe 4 hours before complete failure," Pete replied. "When it goes, it'll take out everything within 1,000 kilometers. Jake's blood turned cold. The Zephyrian ships were still docked to the station. If the reactor went critical, it would kill everyone, human and alien alike. Commander Lyra Voss and Sub-Commander Kira Thane arrived in the control room, their armor clanking with each step. They looked around at the frantic activity with confusion. "What is happening?" Commander Voss demanded. "Our reactor is failing," Jake explained quickly. "If we can't fix it, the explosion will destroy the station and your ships." "Then we will." "Leave immediately," Kira said. "Your ships are locked to our docking system," Katie called out from her terminal. "The power failure has sealed the docking clamps. We can't release them until we get main power back online." The Zephyrians exchanged worried glances. For the first time since their arrival, they looked genuinely concerned. "What can we do to help?" Commander Voss asked. "Nothing," Amy said bluntly. "This requires technical knowledge your people don't have." Jake saw the shock on the aliens' faces. They were used to solving problems with strength and combat skills. But this crisis couldn't be punched or shot or intimidated into submission. Staff Sergeant Chris Hayes arrived with his security team, already organizing evacuation procedures. "How many people can we get to the escape pods?" He asked. Maybe half. Pete said, but the pods won't work if the reactor goes critical. The explosion will catch them. Then we fix the reactor, Jake said firmly. Jake, look at these numbers, Amy said, pointing to her screen. The containment field is collapsing faster than we can repair it. We need someone to go into the reactor core and manually reset the quantum stabilizers. How much radiation exposure are we talking about? Jake asked. Amy was quiet for a long minute. Lethal dose within minutes. Whoever goes in there won't come back out. The control room fell silent except for the constant beeping of alarms. Jake looked around at his team, seeing the fear in their eyes. They all understood what this meant. I'll go, Chris Hayes said immediately. It's my job to protect this station. Chris, you don't have the technical training, Katie protested. You need to know exactly which systems to reset and in what order. I'll talk you through it over the radio, Amy said. The radiation will interfere with communications, Pete added. Whoever goes in there will be on their own. Jake felt the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. He looked at the diagnostic screens showing the reactor's failing systems. He had studied these systems for years, knew every component and every procedure. There was only one logical choice. I'll go, he said quietly. The room erupted in protests. Jake, you can't, Katie said. You're the mission leader. And that's exactly why I have to go, Jake replied. I know the reactor better than anyone. I have the best chance of succeeding. You're too valuable to risk, Chris argued. We're all valuable, Jake said. But I'm the one with the right knowledge. Commander Voss stepped forward, her massive form towering over Jake. You would sacrifice yourself for us? For aliens who have mocked and insulted you? Jake looked up at her, meeting her green eyes steadily. I would sacrifice myself for anyone on this station. That's what humans do? Your males truly are weak, Kira said, but her voice lacked its usual contempt. A warrior would never accept such a mission. A warrior might not, Jake agreed. But a scientist will do whatever it takes to save lives. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Jake put on the station's best radiation suit, knowing it would only buy him a few extra minutes. Amy went over the reset procedures one more time, making sure he understood every step. Remember, you have to reset the stabilizers in sequence, she explained. Primary first, then secondary, then tertiary. If you do them out of order, the whole system will collapse instantly. I understand, Jake said, though his voice was muffled by the helmet. Katie handed him a tablet with the procedures written. Out. In case you forget something, she said, tears in her eyes. Chris Hayes saluted him. It's been an honor serving with you, sir. Jake walked to the reactor chamber with everyone watching. At the entrance, he turned back to see the strange sight of humans and Zephyrians standing together, all of them united in their worry for his safety. The reactor chamber was a nightmare of flashing lights and screaming alarms. Jake could feel the radiation pressing against his suit like a physical weight. His dosimeter was already clicking rapidly, warning him of the lethal environment. The primary stabilizer was a complex piece of equipment covered in warning labels. Jake found the reset switch and began the delicate process of shutting down and restarting the quantum field generators. His hands shook as he worked, partly from fear and partly from the radiation already affecting his nervous system. The tablet Katie had given him was becoming harder to read as his vision blurred. The secondary stabilizer was across the chamber, requiring him to walk through an area of intense radiation. Jake's suit alarms were screaming now, warning him that he was receiving fatal doses of radiation with every step. By the time he reached the tertiary stabilizer, Jake could barely stand. His hands were shaking so badly that he could hardly work the controls. But he kept going, driven by the knowledge that everyone on the station was counting on him. A final reset switch was stuck. Jake pulled at it with all his strength, but his muscles were failing. The radiation had damaged his nervous system, making his movements clumsy and weak. In the control room, the others watched the reactor readings with growing desperation. The cascade failure was still accelerating, and Jake wasn't responding to their radio calls. "He's been in there too long," Amy said, her voice breaking. "The radiation must be affecting his brain." "We have to send someone else," Chris said, but everyone knew it was too late. In the reactor chamber, Jake was fighting the most important battle of his life. Using the last of his strength, he managed to free the stuck switch and complete the reset sequence. The reactor's angry red lights began changing to yellow, then green. The cascade failure stopped, and the quantum containment field stabilized. Jake had done it, but the effort had cost him everything. He collapsed next to the tertiary stabilizer, his radiation suit's alarms falling silent as the power finally failed. In the control room, the humans cheered as the reactor readings returned to normal. The Zephyrians watched in amazement as the weak human male had accomplished what their strongest warriors could never have done. "He did it," Katie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He actually did it." But their celebration was short-lived. When the radiation levels dropped enough for a rescue team to enter the chamber, they found Jake unconscious and barely alive. The question now was whether their medical technology could save a man who had saved them all. The medical bay had never been so crowded. Jake Morrison lay unconscious on the main treatment table, his body fighting against the massive radiation dose he had absorbed. Dr. Amy Clark worked alongside the station's medical team. Using every piece of advanced technology, they had to keep him alive. Sub-Commander Tira Thane stood in the corner, watching the humans work with growing amazement. She had never seen such dedication to saving one life. On Zephyria, a warrior who was too badly wounded to fight was left to die with honor. But these humans were fighting harder to save their fallen comrade than most Zephyrians fought in battle. "His cellular structure is completely damaged," Dr. Nick Torres, Jake's research partner, said as he studied the medical readings. "The radiation has destroyed his bone marrow and damaged his organs." "We have nanobotic repair systems," Amy replied, adjusting the machines connected to Jake's body. "If we can keep him stable long enough, they might be able to rebuild the damaged tissue." Ben Carter, the cultural attach, was operating a complex medical scanner. His hands moved with practiced precision, showing skills that Kira had never suspected he possessed. "The brain scans are showing some improvement," he reported. "The neural pathways are responding to treatment." Communications specialist Lisa Park was coordinating with Earth, arranging for additional medical supplies to be rushed to the station. She spoke rapidly into her headset, her voice calm and professional despite the stress. "The supply ship will be here in 18 hours, she announced. "They're bringing the newest radiation treatment protocols." Kira watched all of this with growing confusion. These humans were working together with a level of cooperation she had never seen before. Each person had a specific role, and they performed it without being ordered or commanded. There was no hierarchy based on strength, no domination by the physically powerful. Commander Lyra Voss entered the medical bay, her massive form barely fitting through the doorway. She looked down at Jake's unconscious form, then at the humans working frantically to save him. "Why do you try so hard to save him?" she asked Amy. "He is clearly too weak to recover." Amy looked up from her work, her eyes flashing with anger. "Because he's our friend. Because he saved all of us. Because every life has value." "But he will never be strong again," Kira protested. "Even if he survives, he will be weaker than before." "Strength isn't just about muscles," Lisa Park said firmly. "Jake showed more courage in that reactor chamber than most people show in their entire lives." "Courage?" Commander Voss repeated, the word like she was testing its taste. He was terrified. I could see it in his eyes. That's what made it courage, Ben Carter explained. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. The Zephyrians found this concept difficult to understand. In their culture, warriors were expected to face danger without fear. Fear was seen as weakness, something to be eliminated or hidden. Your males are strange, Kira said, but her voice lacked its usual mockery. They are weak, but they do strong things. They're not weak, Amy said as she adjusted another machine. They're just strong in ways you don't recognize. Over the next several hours, the humans continued their medical battle. They worked in shifts, ensuring that someone was always monitoring Jake's condition. They shared knowledge, collaborated on solutions, and supported each other through the crisis. Alex Gray, the communications officer, had been working for 12 hours straight, coordinating with medical experts on Earth. His face was exhausted, but he refused to take a break. Dr. Patterson on Earth suggests we try a different approach to the bone marrow regeneration, he reported. She's sending the specifications now. Dan Price, the tactical advisor, was helping with the medical equipment, despite having no medical training. Just tell me what to do, he said when Amy hesitated to give him a complex task. I'll figure it out. The Zephyrians watched this cooperation with growing wonder. On their world, such coordination required strict military hierarchy and constant commands from superior officers. But these humans seemed to organize themselves naturally, each person contributing their unique skills to the common goal. How do they know what to do without being ordered? Kira asked Commander Voss quietly. I do not know, the commander replied. It is unlike anything I have ever seen. On the second day of Jake's treatment, something remarkable happened. His vital signs began to improve. The nanobotic repair systems were working, slowly rebuilding the damaged tissue. The human medical technology was proving more advanced than anything the Zephyrians had seen. His cellular regeneration is accelerating, Dr. Torres announced with excitement. The new treatment protocols are working. Brain function is returning to normal levels, Ben Carter added. He's going to make it. The humans cheered, hugging each other and crying with relief. The Zephyrians watched this emotional display with confusion. Warriors were not supposed to show such feelings, but these humans seemed to see it as natural and healthy. When Jake finally opened his eyes on the third day, his first words were not about his own condition. Is everyone safe? He asked weakly. Did the reactor hold? Everyone's safe, Amy assured him. The reactor is stable. You did it, Jake. The Zephyrians too? Jake asked, looking around the medical bay until he spotted Commander Voss. We are safe, the commander said, her voice softer than usual. Thanks to you. Jake smiled weakly. Good. I was worried about you. Kira stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. You were worried about us? After we mocked you and called you weak? You're our guests, Jake replied. It's our responsibility to keep you safe. Even though we treated you badly? Especially because of that, Jake said. Someone has to be the first to show kindness. The Zephyrians exchanged glances. This concept was completely foreign to their warrior culture. On Zephyria, strength was rewarded and weakness was punished. But this human male was showing kindness to people who had been cruel to him. I do not understand your species, Commander Voss said finally. Your males are physically weak, but they do things that are strongest. Warriors would not attempt. Maybe strength isn't what you think it is, Jake suggested gently. Over the following days, as Jake recovered, the Zephyrians began to see humans differently. They watched Chris Hayes organize the station's security with tactical brilliance that had nothing to do with physical strength. They saw Katie Mills solve engineering problems that would have baffled Zephyrian minds for centuries. They observed how human males and females worked together as equals, each contributing their unique talents without regard for physical dominance. They saw cooperation instead of competition, innovation instead of tradition, and wisdom instead of mere strength. "Your species is not what we expected," Commander Voss admitted to Jake during one of his recovery sessions. "We came here looking for warriors, but we found something else entirely." "What did you find?" Jake asked. The commander was quiet for a long moment. "I think we found something better than warriors. We found people who fight for each other instead of against each other." Kira nodded in agreement. "On Zephyria, the strong rule and the weak serve. But here, the weak become strong by helping others become strong too." "We're not weak," Jake said with a smile. "We're just strong in different ways." As Jake's health improved, the Zephyrians began to understand that human weakness was actually humanity's greatest strength. They had evolved not to dominate others, but to lift each other up. They had learned to survive not through individual power, but through collective intelligence. The revelation changed everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about strength, courage, and civilization itself. 2 weeks after the reactor crisis, Jake Morrison sat in the station's main conference room, still recovering but determined to see this diplomatic mission through to the end. Across from him, Commander Lara Voss and Sub-Commander Kira Thane looked different somehow. The arrogance and contempt that had marked their earlier meetings had been replaced by something Jake had never expected to see: respect. "Dr. Morrison," Commander Voss began, her voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there before, "I must speak to you about our behavior since arriving at your station." Jake raised a hand to stop her. "Commander, there's no need for—" "There is every need," she interrupted firmly. "We came here with closed minds and hardened hearts. We judged your people by our own standards and found you wanting. We were wrong." Kira leaned forward, her green eyes serious. "We called your males weak because they were not like our warriors. But we did not understand that there are many kinds of strength. Your species has achieved something we never thought possible," Commander Voss continued. "You have created a society where the strong protect the weak instead of dominating them, where intelligence is valued over muscle, where cooperation is more important than competition." Jake felt a warmth spreading through his chest. "Thank you, Commander. That means more to us than you know." "We have a proposal," Kira said. "The Zephyrian High Council has authorized me to offer a formal alliance between our peoples." Jake's eyes widened. "An alliance? But just 2 weeks ago, you said we were unworthy of joining your empire." "We were fools," Commander Voss said simply. "We thought strength meant the ability to break things. But you have shown us that true strength is the ability to fix things, to heal things, to save things." Lisa Park, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up with excitement. "What kind of alliance are we talking about?" "A partnership," Kira explained. "Your people have technologies and knowledge we lack. We have physical capabilities and resources you need. Together, we could achieve things neither of us could accomplish alone." Ben Carter, ever the diplomat, asked the practical questions. What would this partnership look like in practice? "We would welcome such an exchange," Kira said eagerly. "Our ships are strong but simple. Your distributed power systems and computer networks could make them much more efficient." Staff Sergeant Chris Hayes, who had remained quiet during most of the discussion, finally spoke up. "What about military cooperation? Not for conquest, but for mutual defense." Commander Voss nodded approvingly. "Your tactical thinking impressed us greatly, Sergeant Hayes. You showed us that strategy and intelligence can overcome brute force. We would be honored to learn from your military doctrine." "And we could learn from your combat techniques," Chris replied. "Not to become conquerors, but to become better protectors." Dr. Amy Clark, who had spent the most time working with Zephyrian technology, raised another point. There's so much we could accomplish together in scientific research. Your people have explored parts of the galaxy we've never seen. The knowledge you've gathered could advance human science by centuries. And your research methods could revolutionize how we approach problems, Kira said. We have always relied on individual effort, but your collaborative approach produces results we never imagined possible. Jake looked around the room at the faces of his team. He saw excitement, hope, and something else, pride. These people had been mocked and dismissed just weeks ago, but they had proven their worth in the most dramatic way possible. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Jake said carefully. Your society is based on physical dominance and hierarchy. Ours is based on equality and cooperation. How do we bridge that gap? Commander Voss was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps it is time for Zephyrian society to learn new ways. Our culture has made us strong in battle, but it has also made us stagnant. We have not grown or changed in centuries. Change is hard, Ben Carter said gently. It took humans thousands of years to develop our current social structures. You shouldn't expect to transform overnight. But we can start, Kira said. We can begin by treating your people as equals rather than inferiors. We can learn to value intelligence and kindness alongside strength and courage. Over the next several hours, they worked out the details of their new partnership. The Zephyrians would establish a permanent embassy on Earth, while humans would send a team to the Zephyrian homeworld. They would share technology, knowledge, and resources for the benefit of both species. Most importantly, they would launch joint exploration missions to unknown parts of the galaxy. Human innovation combined with Zephyrian strength could open up new worlds and new possibilities for both civilizations. Who will command these joint missions? Lisa Park asked. We will share command, Commander Voss said. A human and a Zephyrian working together as equals. I nominate Captain Mike Stevens from our exploration division, Jake said. He's one of our best. And I nominate myself, Commander Voss said with a slight smile. I think I have much to learn from human leadership methods. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he had ever experienced. They had not only achieved first contact with an alien species, but they had also formed a true partnership based on mutual respect. There is one last thing, Kira said as they prepared to leave. Dr. Morrison, your actions in the reactor chamber will be recorded in Zephyrian history. Future generations of our people will learn about the human male who risked his life to save others, including his enemies. I wasn't trying to be a hero, Jake said quietly. I was just doing what needed to be done. That, Commander Voss said, is exactly what made it heroic. 3 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the first joint human Zephyrian exploration vessel. The ship was a marvel of combined technology, incorporating human computer systems and Zephyrian material science. It was stronger than any human ship and smarter than any Zephyrian vessel. Captain Mike Stevens worked alongside Commander Voss on the bridge, their different leadership styles complementing each other perfectly. Chris Hayes trained Zephyrian security forces in human tactical methods while learning their combat techniques. Katie Mills and her Zephyrian counterparts were developing new technologies that neither species could have created alone. Dr. Amy Clark was leading a joint research team studying quantum physics, combining human theoretical knowledge with Zephyrian practical experience. The results were already revolutionizing both civilizations' understanding of the universe, but perhaps the most important change was in the relationships between the crew members. Humans and Zephyrians worked side by side as true partners, each contributing their unique strengths to the common goal of exploration and discovery. Jake watched a group of human and Zephyrian engineers working together to solve a minor technical problem. They discussed ideas freely, built on each other's suggestions, and reached a solution none of them could have found alone. It was everything he had hoped for when he first dreamed of meeting alien life. "You seem pleased," Commander Voss said, joining him at the observation window. "I am," Jake replied. "This is better than I ever imagined first contact could be." "Your people taught us that strength comes in many forms," she said. "But perhaps the greatest strength is the ability to recognize strength in others, even when it looks different from your own." "And your people taught us that we're stronger than we thought," Jake said. "We just needed someone to challenge us to prove it." They stood together in comfortable silence, human and Zephyrian, watching the stars stream by as their joint expedition headed toward unknown worlds and unlimited possibilities. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and now they would explore it together, each species making the other stronger than they could ever be alone. It was the beginning of a new era, not just for humans and Zephyrians, but for the entire galaxy. And it had all started with a moment when the weakest human had shown the greatest strength of all, the willingness to sacrifice himself for others. Even those who had mocked and dismissed him. In the end, that had made all the difference. "D share our medical technology," Jake said, already thinking of the possibilities. "Your people could benefit from our radiation treatment protocols, our surgical techniques, our pharmaceutical research. And we could share our physical enhancement methods," Commander Voss added. "Not to make your males into warriors, but to help them become healthier and stronger." Katie Mills, who had been silent during the formal parts of the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "What about technology exchange? Your material science is incredible, but your computer systems are centuries behind ours." "We rule,"